Welcome back to the BetCanada channel. Katie Caldwell, Jeff Lloyd here with you. We're going to get into some division previews. So, Jeff, let's start with one of the most interesting divisions to me, and that is the AFC North. I honestly think there's a world where maybe three of these four teams could make the playoffs. Who do you have at the top of this division?
I think nothing's changed here in the AFC North, basically from the end of last season to the beginning of this season as far as the
Mhm.
top overall team. Baltimore and, led by, Lamar Jackson, the addition last year of Derrick Henry. And I think
Mhm.
one of the most impressive things for Baltimore last year was for all these years with all the success they've had with Lamar Jackson, they never truly found a way to incorporate the full passing game. And by that, I mean the wide receiver play.
Mhm.
And, with the Zay Flowers and the way he's developed there, it really just brought another element to Baltimore's offense. And, you can't just say, oh, well, we'll rely on Lamar and his legs for 1,000 yards each and every year. It's not sustainable. And
Mhm.
it would ever come to the point where, if anything happened to him, it would truly be the thing that would just derail a Baltimore Ravens season. So I think that's really been one of the impressive things for them. They have a good tight end play. You have a player like Isaiah Likely who's emerging and probably at this point has probably supplanted a stalwart there in Mark Andrews.
Yeah,
So
I
for
agree.
Baltimore, that, is really, the bread and butter of it. The defense, it's going to be, and it always is for Baltimore. Everyone thinks back to years ago when Baltimore was always led by their defense. It always
Yeah.
seems this year they kind of just throw some things at their defense and then they work out the kinks as the season goes on. They're always a team, with GM Ernie Acosta, who's very quick to make a move if he needs to. Jair Alexander became available. Boom, they were on it in a heartbeat. They
Yeah.
knew that Alexander and Lamar had a relationship from Louisville. So they go out and get that veteran cornerback presence that they need. The defense is always, kind of in a state of flux with Baltimore. But again, they finally get a way to rally it and get it to working the way they needed to around the midseason point, and then it's always there for them as they close out the regular season. The one thing, and I'll probably mention this when we bring up Baltimore, I mean, we bring up Buffalo too, is there needs to be a time, and as great as Lamar Jackson and as great as Josh Allen are, there needs to be a time where we have to start talking about these guys and saying, is winning the AFC championship, that's got to happen now for one of these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, they are both MVP contenders every year, but
Mhm.
it's going to have to come to a point where they get that team and they actually supplant a Kansas City and actually go play for a championship. That's what they're going to need to accomplish.
Man, you're so right, and it just feels like Lamar Jackson last year, I think he should have been MVP last year. Um, the you're right though about like somebody finally has to take down the Chiefs, and we'll get to that when we get to that division preview. But the Bengals are so interesting to me too, and this year to me the story looks a lot the same as last year, where this offense is incredible. Joe Burrow had an incredible year. The defense still looks like a huge issue to me. They've got a very young secondary. The O-line still needs some work. They brought some new guys in. Like, what is your read on the Bengals this year? Because like their ceiling is so high with that offense, but then with that defense, I think their floor is lower than it needs to be. What's your read on the Bengals?
I think that's probably a really good way to put it. And, I cover the Browns daily. So look, getting my jokes off about the Cincinnati Bengals, hey, it just comes naturally. But I mean, if you were supposed to invest in the future for the Cincinnati Bengals and you
Mhm.
said, well, we're going to invest in Joe Burrow, we're going to invest in Jamar Chase, we're going to invest in T. Higgins, all players in the prime of their career, all were drafted. Higgins and Burrow were drafted in the same year. They drafted Chase the following year. The way they spent the money and they chose who was going to get the big deals certainly makes all the sense in the world.
You want to keep
Trey Hendricks.
Joe Burrow happy. Absolutely.
But if you can score 28 plus a week, you can say, well, yeah, our defense isn't that great, but we know what we can do on offense.
Yeah,
The Trey Hendricks thing is difficult. Look, does he deserve more money? Yes. Is he one of the most decorated pass rushers over the last 2 seasons? Yes. But he's not in the prime of his career. He is 30 years old. All the other guys are in their mid 20s. So trying to work that out with him. And I think the longer this goes on, it's probably going to favor Cincinnati
I think so
because
too.
I don't know how you open up a situation to create a trade opportunity for a player who is going to make as much as Trey Hendrickson is going to
Mhm.
stand to make at this point in the year. It's really difficult, or it's going to be a team that maybe is not really that successful. So they have the payroll opening, and I don't think that's what Trey Hendrickson wants at this point in
Yeah.
his career. And then the thing, as difficult as it was for the Trey Hendrickson situation, they draft Shamar Stewart in the first round. So you figure,
Mhm.
hey, if it doesn't work out, at least they went out and they got a pass rusher. But now you're in the same boat with Shamar Stewart
Yeah.
basically as you are with Trey Hendrickson, and, a lot of it, money is just not as financially available for the Cincinnati Bengals as it is from some other
That's
franchises.
right. They're
It's
no
just a
Dallas
fact.
Cowboys. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just a fact, and you feel bad for them because you think that they've actually done extremely well
Mhm.
considering the fact that they are playing, obviously with a much tighter wallet than some other franchises. But overall, their defense does have some issues. There's not really a guy in that secondary that you say, "Oh, well, he's a standout corner or he's a
Yeah.
standout safety." They finally moved on from some of the linebackers, which seemed one of the weirdest things to do. Most teams in the NFL don't value the linebacker position. They don't pay for the linebacker position.
Mhm.
But meanwhile, the Bengals were paying two. And it was like, well, guy, I mean, maybe if you distributed the money a little bit better, you wouldn't necessarily be in the situations that you are. But I think for Hendrickson, again, he's probably going to fold, unfortunately, and he's not going to get the money that he felt maybe he was truly entitled to.
Yeah.
But he's going to get to play on this team, which should contend. And for the Bengals, it's all going to come down to what they can do on the defensive side of the
Yeah.
ball.
I
And they don't have to be
completely agree.
great. They don't have to be great. They have to be average. And the other thing is they gotta be able to get off the field kinda quick. They
Yeah.
can't tire themselves out because they don't have the overall talent to just go out there and go against a Baltimore for 60 minutes or go against Kansas City, Buffalo, these better franchises in the American Football Conference.
Mhm.
So, Cincinnati, I agree with everything they've done, and I think they just gotta find a way to either just, they gotta get the Shamar Stewart thing figured out. They
Yes.
got to at least get a 1-year Band-Aid for Trey Hendrickson, and then all of a sudden, I think the overall picture for the Bengals probably looks a little bit better here for 2025.
Quick pause. If you haven't subscribed to the BetCanada YouTube channel, you can do so below. It's free and it helps support our channel so we can keep bringing you NFL and NHL content. Now, back to the show. The Steelers. Let's get into the Aaron Rodgers of it all cuz the man, I did a video for BetCanada and talking about this, but if he just has such a circus surrounding that man. Like they signed up for so much chaos with him. All of it is self-inflicted for himself, by the way. If you're going to bring in that media circus that surrounds him, I want it to move the needle way closer towards the Super Bowl. He doesn't move the needle for me that much. I just look at the play, and he started to improve last season. His mobility got better because he was obviously coming off that injury, but he's still 100 years old. This doesn't move the needle for me where Aaron Rodgers bumps them up to the top of the division. To me, they feel forever destined to just be maybe 9-8, and then Mike Tomlin keeps his winning season. What are your thoughts on Rodgers? And then let's get into the big trade this week, bringing in Jalen Ramsey. Jonnu Smith was an important part of that, where that information kind of kept coming out after. Jonnu Smith, I do kind of like in that situation. Minka Fitzpatrick is gone. What's the read on the Steelers?
I think I'm kind of with you in this, and the whole thing for me feels so weird because you figure if
Yes.
Roethlisberger's now gone, I guess what is it now the fourth season with Ben Roethlisberger gone?
Hmm.
Your natural thought, the way Steelers did business was all these years would have been, all right, we're going to find our guy.
Hmm.
Obviously we maybe have some sort of soft rebuild going on, but now should have been the time where the Steelers were, already back in contention with the next in the lineage of who their franchise quarterbacks were going to be. And it feels like there's a little bit of a disconnect maybe between ownership and front office and Mike Tomlin.
Mm.
Mike Tomlin every year got this team to where it needed to be. And now it's like, well, are we doubting Mike Tomlin? Because I mean, it looks like they, on paper, and there's people trying, oh, the Steelers went all in. Well, I don't think a
Did
41-year-old
they?
quarterback is all in.
No.
Okay. I mean, you traded, and look, Jalen Ramsey and Minka Fitzpatrick at this point in their careers, they're still names, but I don't
But
know
it's
that
not the
either
same.
one of them are necessarily the top player that they used to be. I mean, are you telling me Jalen Ramsey is going to be the difference between shutting down Jamar Chase and T. Higgins? I have a hard time believing that. The Jonnu Smith thing, now, you already had Fryermuth. They spent a high second round pick 2 years ago on Washington, and he's been a
Yeah.
great blocker. I don't think the receiving aspect of his game has really developed the way they had hoped. So, obviously you're talking a lot more 12 personnel,
Hmm.
13 personnel, a lot more tight ends on the field, which fits their offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith, and all of that. But again, to your point, if they go 9-8, what was the point of what they did this year? Because next year it's
Exactly.
going to be the same thing. We need to
Yeah.
go find a quarterback. We have other things we need to work on. Meanwhile, other players have gotten older. DK Metcalf, the tight ends.
Hmm.
They have the whole situation with TJ Watt. And, we have and it's every pass rusher, and they all kinda go in line. Well, he was given the highest non-quarterback contract ever. Well, now I want it. And for TJ Watt to have his name out there for this, I don't get it. I mean, TJ Watt basically was on a milk carton for, like, the last 4 or 5 weeks of the
Yes.
season last year. Was he probably injured? Sure. But at this point, when you're getting to this age of 29, 30 years old, you just assume that something is going to come off of the overall game. So
Mhm.
how do I give you top player non-quarterback money when there's basically a 98% chance that I've already gotten the best out of you than I have ever going to get again?
Mhm.
So I think for Pittsburgh, again, it's going to come down to, and even still, the secondary, and Darius Slay's another one. Okay, Darius Slay's a great name in the NFL.
Yep,
But I mean, we're talking about a guy that was a really, really good player 3 and 4 seasons ago.
that's
And the
right.
Philadelphia Eagles, they don't just move on from you before, just for the sake of it. They obviously felt they would be better off without him. So they move on. I do think Jonnu Smith is certainly interesting for them, but with him going to and reuniting here with Arthur within this Pittsburgh Steelers offense, it's not going to fool. I mean, nobody's going to be fooled. Last year, I think Jonnu Smith caught a lot of people by surprise because they just kept going to him in Miami. But now, if you're facing Pittsburgh, part of your game plan is going to be, okay, where is Jonnu Smith?
Yep.
In these sets, what have we watched on film? Okay, it's gonna be a lot of slip screens, a lot of dump.
Mhm.
I don't think by any means whatsoever Jonnu Smith is gonna go out there and duplicate what he did last year with 88 receptions, which was the greatest tight end season in the history for the Miami Dolphins. So for Pittsburgh, look, I mean, I think maybe they were a possible second place team in the AFC North to begin with.
Mm.
I don't I still don't think it's like, it's closer to third place than it is to first place because I think
Me
Baltimore's
too.
probably gonna take this one pretty easily. But again, these moves they made, I don't necessarily think this team is just all of a sudden, we're gonna mention them in the same breath with the Chiefs and the Bills
No.
and the Ravens. And it could just be another case where, oh, well, they didn't break their streak. They went to the playoffs, but they lost
Yeah.
in the first round again. And then here they will be again next year, drafting in the 20s,
Mhm.
hoping somehow, some way a franchise quarterback would be available in round one in the 20s, which almost never happens.
Almost never. You are absolutely right. Okay, the last team, you're the Browns expert. Are they the clear 4th place one in this division? What's their ceiling, and what's the quarterback situation? There's so many interesting questions around the Browns this season for me.
And I think questions is the biggest way to discuss this
Yeah.
because, hey, all their offensive line looks like they're coming back. Everybody's healthy. Okay, but we're talking about an offensive line that was a top 5 unit in 2021, and we're
Mm.
talking about the same guys now. And those 4 guys are all 30 years or older now. Oh, they're going to go back to the wide zone scheme. That was always the best bread and butter. Okay, again, but we're talking about guys that have gotten older since then.
Yep.
Can they go back and perform like that? Maybe, but yeah, it's a question. Um, the running back room, as much as it pains me, I knew the Nick Chubb thing was over.
We all
And
did.
of course, and like fan bases like Cleveland, and because they don't have the overall success to celebrate that other franchises do, what do they celebrate? They celebrate their favorite players and the guys who have meant the most to them. And certainly Nick Chubb was one of those guys. But it was time to start moving on in that running back room. And they drafted 2 young guys who look like fantastic players. And we'll see how that works for them. Defensively, they got the Miles Garrett. As soon as it was a raging inferno, within 3 weeks, it ended exactly the way that all of us who cover the Browns knew it was going to. The Browns could not even afford to trade Miles Garrett. They would have
Mhm.
basically had to cut every other veteran on that roster and become an expansion team. So it was Miles, you're going to get the biggest bag of money there is to be given.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, Miles Garrett found his smile again. The rest of the defense, it's tough that Jeremiah Usu-Koramoah is not a part of this team this year. And if you asked me at this day and time, maybe he's never a part of this Browns defense again. That was the selection of Carson Schlesinger that certainly scratched people's heads at the time. But
Mhm.
then once you got the official on JOK, hey, oh yeah, it made sense. You had a big presence on this defense who's no longer here. You need something to cover that up.
Right.
They have a real interesting scenario in the secondary where, their second starting corner, Martin Emerson, and then their nickel, Greg Newsome, Both are in contract years. So it's a really difficult spot there. Obviously, both of those guys are concerned about their future money, where they're going to be playing. They were both really good in 2023. Both weren't nearly as good in 2024. So, both of those guys, A, want to get better for the overall sake of the team, but want to get better for themselves as they go into free agency. And, there could be a chance where the Browns only bring back one. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a scenario where the Browns didn't bring back either if they both played
Mhm.
well and maybe priced themselves out of the Cleveland market. And then it's the quarterback situation. And I'm going to kind of go with where we were talking with Pittsburgh. And there's so many other teams that are like this. If you go 8-9, 9-8, 7-10, if that's what the Browns do, and the majority of the games are started by Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett, then why did you bother drafting two rookie quarterbacks? Or why
Absolutely.
did you bother playing the veterans? Because look,
Mhm.
the Browns have 2 first-round picks for 2026. They have their own, they have Jacksonville's. It's very
Right.
likely the
Yep.
Browns pick could be a top 10 pick. Jacksonville, and we'll get to it, looks good, but there's some combustibility factors there as
Yes,
well. But
certainly.
you're hoping maybe that you caught lightning in a bottle, that maybe
Mm.
Dylan Gabriel or maybe Shedeur Sanders, drafted in the 3rd round or the 5th round respectively, maybe you stole a quarterback. Maybe you
Mm.
get the 49ers luxury of Brock Purdy for those years, where you're paying your quarterback zip zero zilch,
Yep.
and you're allowed to spend money on a lot of other places. Now, that would be absolutely fantastic for Cleveland. But these guys are going to need some significant time to even possibly change the alteration of the path from the Browns taking a quarterback early next April. So, I guess, I mean, if you told me they started Joe Flacco and there could be a scenario where maybe they made it back into the playoffs again as a wild card, I wouldn't poo-poo it. And the reason I wouldn't is because I've seen it. You know what I'm saying? I have the physical evidence that Joe Flacco and Kevin Stefanski worked together. Now, wide receiver wise, Jerry Jeudy came in and all of a sudden the transition from Amari Cooper to Jeudy, seamless.
Mhm.
And Cedric Tillman was a good player for them last year. There was a 3-week stretch. It was 7 receptions for 85 yards and a touchdown over a 3-week stretch.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, you say, hey, there maybe is the number 2 guy. There maybe is X receiver, 6'3", 225, runs the routes over the middle, can take a little punishment, but
Mhm.
then got hit Thursday Night Football against the Steelers. Didn't see him again for the rest of the season. He's looking the part thus far again. Deontay Johnson's kind of a wild card here. Always a talented player. Last season and a half or so, obviously got into his own head.
Mhm.
And, it's okay that you get frustrated with the place and the surrounding that you're in, but you ask out and they let you out, okay, that should be it. But then it was, okay, well, I'm in Carolina. Now it's a problem I'm a problem in Carolina. Then I go to Baltimore. Now I'm a problem in Baltimore. Then I go to Houston and I'm a problem in Baltimore. I'm a problem there again. Then he goes back to Baltimore and Baltimore said, okay, you're here, but we had nothing to do with you. You were on our,
Mhm.
we own you, but you do not play for us. And, to his credit, he's been humble and he's kind of taken his own, basically what he had done to
Mm.
create this problem for himself. Seems thankful for the opportunity. Look, I mean, back in the day in the NFL, when you basically, ran roughshod, there were only a few teams that you would get a chance to be, a reclamation project.
Mhm.
Cleveland Browns, those types of teams. So he seems thankful for his opportunity. But, the thing is going to be, is he going to be able to perform? And it's not always easy to perform when, and that's the thing here is because, everybody wants to say, well, what are the expectations? I don't know who the quarterback is. These guys are going to take just as many practice reps, probably with Flacco, Pickett,
Yep.
Shador, Gabriel. So where is the relationship built? And like, how do these guys get overall comfortable within the system? And that I think is going to be the biggest thing that's going to be the challenge for the Browns is just because you don't know who the quarterback is yet.
Mhm.
And then by the time you do land on one, and they're probably only going to keep three, but I think they're all so close, probably in talent level and what they can do, that it could really kind of be a revolving door effect at the position, which really allows for no real rapport to be
Mm.
established throughout the season.